Hello, a little bit different video here today. Not a tying video, but related to fishing. This is a low-side Hyde Drift Boat I acquired a number of years ago. It was in great serviceable condition and everything at the time when I got it. Used it for many, many years. As is most the case when you get something like this and you're using it, you start to think, oh, I'd rather have this component over there, or I'd like to turn this way, or I'd like to do that. Especially this one, it's seen many years of service and it needed a nice paint job and everything else. So a couple years ago, I decided it was time to fix it up a little bit. In the process of doing that, I ran into some issues with the hull. It had a couple layers of rolled fiberglass and epoxy on it that were actually separating. There was some overlap here that had separated, and there was some water up underneath it. Part of it I'll show you in more detail in a minute, but in the back end had kind of an epoxy rhino shield type skid protection, scuff protection on the back of it. And a lot of it was gouged up and everything else. And I just decided to go ahead and see if I could take all this down to the original hull and then put a new application on it. Question became what application and how. So I'm doing this video and a series of videos as I work on this boat for two different reasons. One, when I was searching for information, I couldn't find anything hardly, especially tailored to drift boats. Because see, the thing about a drift boat is the hull on this is going to get scraped up. It's not necessarily designed to get scraped up, but it's going to happen because you're in a river, you're in shallower conditions, you're going to misjudge a rock or a log or something, and you're going to get scraped up. This isn't a hull like on a nice sailboat or a power boat that you want a nice smooth glass finish on, because it's seldom ever, hopefully, not going to contact the bottom or get scratched up. So that was my first consideration. And like I said, I couldn't find anything hardly out there about redoing it. So I decided to go ahead and start doing some videos on this. Somewhere in the videos or the posts will be some pictures I took previously of what it looked like. So I'll get into that a little bit more. But primarily the videos are done so that other people will hopefully find this video and pick up something that will help them if they have a project similar to this. The second is, this has been sitting here for about a year because when I started it, other factors in life and family basically put this on the back burner, and I really want to get it done. So I figure if I commit to doing a series of videos, it'll get my butt out here and work on it a little bit more often. All I really need to do is to get the hull and the sides done. The sides are going to get sanded down and repainted. The inside work it's in good shape. It has no leaks or anything in it, but the inside work for the seats and the benches, I can still go fishing in it, and I can do that anytime. The problem with this is I have to have this covered. I don't have anywhere inside to work on this. So I had to put this temporary awning up to give me cover, and I have to have warm weather. I couldn't do this putting epoxy and fiberglass on this in April when it's cold. It's not good. So I had to wait till it was summer. So I'm now getting to it. So those are the reasons that I'm doing it. Right now, I'm gonna give you a quick overview of the hull, and I'll explain the different parts of it and how it was set up. And then we'll talk about where I'm at now and what my next steps are. What we're looking at is the bottom of the boat from up above it. As you can see, the front portion of the boat still has the original finish on it. And I'll get back to that front section in just a moment. But the middle section here was what was damaged the most. And I think why eventually somebody just put a couple of layers of fiberglass and epoxy over this. The original finish on the bottom has been rubbed off in many different places, all right down to the wood. And the interesting thing is that the fiberglass that was on there the rolled fiberglass and epoxy that was on there, like I said, had some cracks in it, and there were some overlapping places that had kind of cracked away and lifted up a little bit, and there was water getting underneath there. This boat in the fall of 2020, by November, was sitting in my backyard on its trailer, up right side up more or less, but not in the water until May of 2021. In May of 2021, I took it off the trailer, stripped it down, flipped it over on some sawhorses to start working on it. When I peeled up this fiberglass and everything, that wood right there was wet. Not just damp, but wet. I mean, there was a bunch of water still on it. And it hadn't even been in the water for 6 or 7 months throughout the winter. Now, it's not spongy. The wood is still all good, so there's no rot. There's nothing like that. It's chewed up a little bit, but the wood is good. So actually, it kind of turns out pretty nice that I ended up not getting to this last summer because it's been sitting upside down under an awning, so it has not gotten any moisture or anything on it for over a year, which I think probably gave that wood an excellent amount of time to really, really dry out real well, so that after the next prep work is done and the next fiberglass and epoxy is put on, it won't have any damp wood underneath. You can see the holes that are drilled into the bottom of the boat. I'll zoom in on this a little bit so that you can see it a little bit more for two reasons. One, you can see the holes a little bit better, but you can also see the gouges. There's a number of deep gouges in here and scrapes across it. Those are the things I need to fill in. But those holes, when I talked to Andy Miller at Boatworks today, said the only time he'd ever seen anybody do anything like that on a boat is they're trying to dry out the wood. So they drill a bunch of shallow holes in it, adding more surface area open to the air to try and get that wood dried out. That may or may not be what was the reasoning for all of that, because you don't have any past where all this damage is on the back 1/3 of the boat, and you don't have anything on the front 1/4 up by the bow either, which was kind of interesting. But so moving on down, when you get down to the back 1/3 portion of the boat, you'll notice where there's some fiberglass that kind of looks like it extends from both sides across. That's where the rolled fiberglass ended. And it wasn't roving fiberglass. It was actually just a rolled woven fiberglass that was put on it. But that's where the fiberglass more or less ended. The fiberglass that's still here, I think, came about from patching that up a little bit, as well as the fiberglass on the sides, right on the corners of the bottom right there. But that's what this is. Now you're starting to get into what was the black epoxy, for lack of another better term, rhino shield type application that was on this, to basically just be a kind of a scratch and skid protection on the back. On the backside here, I could not really scrape that stuff up, so I had to use a belt sander with the 40 and 80 grit sandpaper on there. You'll see I've got some spots that are still not sanded down, but the thing is they're not bumps. What I was looking for was to sand it smooth, at least smooth to my hand. I don't have to have all of this just perfectly glass smooth, ready for, the fiberglass and a finish for a really nice smooth bottom. That's not what I'm looking for. So these spots that are left on there, if you rub your hand over them from the white to the black, they're nice and smooth and they seem to be the same level. The nice thing is they're already stuck onto the bottom really, really well. So I'm not really going to worry too much about trying to get those off to get down to the original bottom. If I'm down to some sort of semblance of material that is all bonded really, really well, so that the next layers that I'm putting on will bond and it'll all stick together real well, that's what I'm looking for. But this is the back 1/3, and like I said, this is where there was no fiberglass. It took a good bit of sanding, but it actually came off pretty quick with the 40 and 80 grit. You got to clean the sandpaper often as you're doing this, um, so that otherwise you're just changing belts out a lot. So this is going back up to the front again. You can see where originally the fiberglass kind of rolled over or flowed over the sides, so the corners were protected. Still working on those. As I said, the next step is to finish up any of this prep work and then get get those holes and gouges filled in, get everything relatively smooth and cleaned and prepped for the fiberglass as well as epoxy. Now, as I mentioned on the very front of this, and I'll jump back to the front of this and show you real quick, the very front portion of the boat, when you look at it, it's probably about a good 1/4 of the overall length of the hull. This is all the original finish. Now, there was fiberglass over this, but when I was peeling the fiberglass off of the portion that has exposed wood, it took a little effort with a putty knife to get that raised up and pulled back and peeled off. But by the time I got up to this section in the front, where it was right onto the original hull, it actually peeled up really, really easy. I mean, I got a putty knife under it and started it, and as it tore along the edges of the hull, it just peeled right off, came right off in a whole big, huge triangular section. So even that wasn't really, on that well. This is a boat that's been used for many, many years. Like I said, it's almost 40 years old as far as I know. And so we're just going to give it an overall real good facelift. So that's basically some of the issues with the hull originally and where I'm at now. I have sanded down most of the hull. I've got some spots still to work on. I've got to scrub and get some dirt off of this, the edges here. Most of this fiberglass is on pretty solid, so I'll probably just leave it. If it's not coming off and it's bonded well, I'll just leave it. So that's where I'm at with this. As you saw on the footage of the entire hull, I got some divots and scrapes and holes and things that I've got to fill in. That's going to probably be the next step. Keep getting some of this off and the bottom, get it smoothed off. I'll scrub this to get any loose dirt off. And all those scrapes and divots, I'll make certain there's no dirt in there. Then the next step is going to be using this product here by Total Boat. It is a de-waxer and surface prep. Now, Paul Hyde over at Total Boat was a major help in terms of figuring out what the heck to do with this hull. Not sponsored by Total Boat at all here, but he was a big, big help in terms of the products that they have and what would work for this. The other person is a guy by the name of Andy Miller at Boatworks Today. Now, I'll have links for all those sites down in the description and everything. Again, not sponsored by him, but Andy was a big help in determining some of the status of the hull and what would probably be the best application for it. So the next step is going to be to surface prep it with this, and then I'll use some fairing compound. Total Boat has a nice Total Fair. This is a 2-part epoxy fairing compound. And I'll use this to fill in all the scrapes and all the divots and everything that are in the hull. Sand those down a little bit smooth. Then I'm going to look, I'll probably take a straight edge over the hull, and I'm going to look for any shallow spots. I'm not looking, again, for this to be glass smooth when I'm done. But what I am looking for is if there are any shallow spots that I could fill in with some fairing compound to bring it even. So when I put the glass on it, I don't end up with an air pocket down below it. So that's what the fairing compound is going to be for initially. Once I get this fairly smooth, if I have, like I think I have a bit of a rise right here in the hull, that's fine. I don't, again, want it, this doesn't have to be nice and glass smooth, so when you look down it, you don't see any imperfections. It's going to get scraped up. And I realize that probably every 2 or 3 years, I'll have to flip it over, scrub it down, fill in some scratches with some fairing compound, probably then repaint it again. So that's just part of the nature of the beast. So once I get the hull all smooth with the fairing compound, then I'm going to be putting some rolled fiberglass, 2 layers on this with epoxy on top of it. That's just going to give me about another 1/8 of an inch of protection on the bottom. Once that's in place, I will again smooth that out with more fairing compound so that when I paint it, again, I don't have any real, not super low spots. I mean, a low spot's fine, but I don't want any pockets where it, like a gouge or a dip or something like that. I want that filled in and fairly smooth. It'll be a flat black on the bottom, so it'll kind of look pretty much like what was on there. I don't need to have a gloss finish. I don't want a gloss finish simply because this is a drift boat. Like I said, it's going to get abused. So that's the next steps for the bottom. The sides, like I said, will also get sanded down. I'm using the heat gun to get the decals, numbers, registration numbers, things like that off of it. And then I'll sand that down and paint it. I'm going to paint it the same kind of dark blue color that it is right now and maybe put some other accents into it. We'll see as we go down the road on that. So that's where it's at, and I'll from now on try to get some footage as I'm sanding things down and doing things so that in future videos you'll have a little bit of that footage and those back steps. But by the time I do the next video, I'll have some of that as I'm prepping this and actually getting the first application of fairing compound and even the second one, so that probably the third video I'll actually be putting the epoxy on here. So thanks for watching. I hope this is helpful for somebody in the future if you have a project or something like this that you want to do. If you have any questions or anything, or if you have any advice, feel free to leave comments down below. And there may be some things that I'm missing here that would be helpful to make this a little bit better or a little bit shorter. I don't know. I'm not a boat builder. This is the first time I've ever tackled a project like this. So I'm just kind of winging it with a little bit of advice. So anyway, thanks for watching. Always remember, it's boat repair. If you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.